The great hall of the palace was filled with light. Thousands of floating crystals hung in the air, each one glowing with soft blue and purple colors. The walls were made of white stone that seemed to breathe with life. Nobles from across the empire stood in their finest clothes, watching the ceremony with curious eyes. At the center of the hall stood. She was the third princess of the empire, a civilization that ruled over 40 star systems. Her skin was pale like moonlight, and her silver hair fell past her shoulders like a waterfall. Her eyes were the color of violet storms, and they held nothing but cold anger. Today was her wedding day, but there was no joy in her heart. She looked at the man standing across from her. He was human. His name was Ho, and he came from a small planet called Earth. He was tall for a human, with black hair cut short and eyes as dark as the space between stars. He wore simple clothes, a dark suit that looked plain compared to the bright colors around him. His face showed no emotion. He just stood there waiting. Hated him already. Not because he had done anything wrong. She hated him because of what this marriage meant. It meant that her empire needed something from the humans. It meant that she, a princess of royal blood, had to lower herself to marry a creature from a species that had only discovered space travel 200 years ago. They had been sailing between stars for 10,000 years. They had built cities on moons and stations in the hearts of nebulas. They had fought wars against empires that humans could not even imagine. And now, she had to marry one of these primitive beings. Her father, the emperor, had explained it to her many times. The humans controlled something valuable. Their home system sat at the crossroads of 3 major trade routes. Without access to those routes, the empire would lose billions in trade every year. The humans had refused to give access unless there was a bond between the two peoples. A marriage, a political marriage, her marriage. The priest of the old light stepped forward. He was an ancient with wrinkled skin and eyes that had seen centuries pass. He raised his hands and began to speak the words of binding. Did not listen. She looked at Ho and wondered what he was thinking. Did he feel honored to marry a princess? Did he feel afraid? Did he feel anything at all? His face told her nothing. He simply stood there like a statue, his dark eyes looking straight ahead. He did not smile. He did not frown. He was like a wall of stone. When the priest asked for her hand, raised it slowly. Ho raised his as well. Their palms touched, and the priest wrapped a silver ribbon around their joined hands. The ribbon glowed with ancient power, sealing their bond. It was done. She was married to a human. The crowd made polite sounds of approval. Some clapped. Some bowed their heads, but could see the truth in their eyes. They thought this was shameful. They thought she had been sacrificed for politics. They her. She pulled her hand away from Ho as soon as the ribbon faded. She did not look at him. She turned and walked toward the side of the hall where her handmaidens waited. The celebration feast lasted for hours. Sat at the high table, eating nothing, drinking only water. Ho sat beside her, but they did not speak, not one word. He ate quietly and watched the dancers perform in the center of the hall. Once their eyes met, expected to see something in his gaze, anger, sadness, hope, anything. But there was nothing, just calm, dark emptiness, like looking into a deep well with no bottom. She looked away quickly. When the feast ended, servants led them to their chambers. As was tradition, they would share a room, walked through the door and immediately went to the window. She stared out at the night sky, at the 3 moons that hung over the capital city. She heard Ho enter behind her. His footsteps were soft, almost silent. He walked to the far side of the room and sat on a chair near the wall. "I will sleep on this chair," he said. His voice was quiet and low. "You can have the bed." Did not answer. She was surprised that he could speak so well. His accent was strange, but his words were clear. "I know you did not want this," he continued. "I did not want it either, but here we are." She turned to look at him. "Then we understand each other. This marriage is nothing but paper and ceremony. You are my husband in name only. Do not expect anything more." Ho nodded slowly. "I expect nothing." There was something in the way he said those words that made pause. It was not defeat. It was not sadness. It was something else. Something she could not name. She pushed the thought away and turned back to the window. Days passed, then weeks, kept herself busy with her duties as a princess. She attended meetings with advisors. She visited hospitals and schools. She met with nobles and merchants. She did everything she could to avoid her husband. Ho did not seem to mind. He spent his days walking through the palace gardens or sitting in the library, reading books about history. Sometimes saw him from her window, standing alone in the garden, looking up at the sky. The servants whispered about him. They said he was strange. They said he never spoke unless someone spoke to him first. They said he trained his body every night when everyone else was asleep, running through exercises in the dark courtyard. Ignored the whispers. She did not care what the human did. He was nothing to her. One night she could not sleep. She walked through the palace halls, trying to clear her mind. She found herself near the training grounds, a large open space where soldiers practiced combat. She heard sounds coming from inside, soft sounds, the whisper of movement. Curious, she looked through the doorway. Ho was there. He stood in the center of the grounds, moving through a series of combat forms. His movements were smooth and fast, like flowing water. His body twisted and turned with perfect control. In his hands, he held a wooden training sword, and he swung it through the air with deadly grace. Watched frozen in place. She had seen warriors train. She had seen the best fighters in the empire practice their art, but this was different. There was something raw about the way Ho moved, something dangerous. He finished his forms and stood still, breathing hard. Then he turned and looked directly at her. Their eyes met. For a moment saw something in his gaze, something deep and old, something that had seen terrible things. Then it was gone. His face became empty again. "Princess," he said, bowing his head slightly, "I did not mean to disturb you." Said nothing. She turned and walked away, her heart beating faster than it should. That night she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time, she wondered who Ho really was. What secrets did he carry behind those dark, empty eyes? She told herself she did not care. He was just a human, just a political tool. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that she was wrong. 3 months passed since the wedding. The palace had grown used to the presence of the human prince. Servants bowed to him when he walked through the halls. Guards saluted him at every door. But behind their polite faces, everyone knew the truth. He was an outsider. He would always be an outsider. Made sure of that. She never ate breakfast with him. She never walked beside him in public. When ambassadors visited the palace, she stood alone, greeting them as if she had no husband at all. Ho was always placed at the far end of the room, sitting quietly in a corner like a forgotten piece of furniture. He never complained. He never asked for better treatment. He simply accepted his place with the same empty calm he always showed. This made angry. She did not understand why. Perhaps she wanted him to fight back. Perhaps she wanted him to show some fire, some pride, some sign that he was worth something. But he gave her nothing. One morning she was walking through the eastern garden when she saw him sitting by the pond. He held a small book in his hands, reading in the soft morning light. Birds sang in the trees above him. The water was still and clear like glass. Stopped behind a pillar and watched him. He looked peaceful, almost normal, like any other person enjoying a quiet moment alone. But there was something about the way he sat, the way his eyes moved across the pages, that seemed heavy, like he carried a weight that no one else could see. Her handmaiden, a young named Bora, appeared beside her. "My princess," Bora whispered, "why do you watch him?" Pulled her eyes away. "I was not watching him. I was simply passing through." Bora smiled but said nothing. She had served for 10 years. She knew when her princess was lying. They walked away from the garden together. As they moved through the halls, Bora spoke again. "The servants have been talking, my princess." "They always talk," said. "What do they say now?" "They say the human wakes before dawn every day. He runs through the training grounds for 2 hours without rest. Then he bathes in cold water and reads until breakfast." Frowned. Why would anyone do such things? "They also say he has scars," Bora continued. "Many scars all over his body. One of the bath attendants saw them. She said his back looks like a map of old battles." Stopped walking, she turned to face Bora. "Scars." "Yes, my princess. Deep scars, old scars." She said she had never seen anything like it, not even on the most experienced soldiers. Thought about this for a long moment. She remembered the night she had seen Ho training alone, the way he had moved, the thing she had seen in his eyes before it disappeared. "It means nothing," she said finally. "He is just a human. They are a violent species. They probably fight among themselves like animals." Bora nodded, but her eyes held doubt. Days later, attended a meeting with the Imperial Council. These were the 12 most powerful nobles in the empire, advisors to her father, the emperor. They gathered in the great council chamber to discuss matters of state. The main topic that day was there were a species of warriors from the outer regions of the galaxy. They did not build, they did not trade, they only conquered. For the past 100 years, they had been expanding their territory, swallowing smaller civilizations one by one. Now they were moving closer to space. Lord One, the oldest member of the council, spread a star map across the table. Red dots marked the advance. There were hundreds of them, spreading like a disease. "They have taken the system," he said, his voice grim. "The fleet was destroyed in less than a day. No survivors." Felt a chill run through her. They were not weak. They had strong ships and brave soldiers. If they had fallen so easily, what did that mean for everyone else? "What do we know about their numbers?" asked Lady Min, the council's military advisor. "We do not know exact numbers," Lord One replied. "But our scouts estimate at least 2,000 ships in their main fleet, perhaps more." The chamber fell silent. 2,000 ships. The Empire had perhaps 1,500 in total, spread across 40 systems. "We must prepare our defenses," Lady Min said. "Call the fleets home. Strengthen the border stations. We cannot afford to be caught unprepared." The council members nodded and began to argue about strategies. Listened, but did not speak. She was only 25 years old, young by standards. Her voice held little power in this room. As she left the chamber, she noticed someone standing in the shadows near the door. It was Ho. He had been listening. "Were you spying on the council?" she demanded. Ho looked at her with those calm, dark eyes. "The door was open. I was simply walking past." "You should not hear these matters. They are not your concern." "They are everyone's concern," he said quietly. "They do not care about borders or treaties. They only care about war." Narrowed her eyes. "What do you know about the—" "I know enough." He paused. "I know that they have destroyed 17 civilizations in the past century. I know that they do not take prisoners. I know that they believe war is the only purpose of life." "How do you know these things?" Ho was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Humans have been watching the galaxy for a long time, Princess. We may be young, but we are not blind." Before could respond, he bowed his head and walked away. She watched him go, her thoughts spinning. There was more to this human than she had believed, much more. That night she asked Bora to find information about Ho. Where had he come from? What had he done before the marriage? Why had the human government chosen him for this alliance? 2 days later, Bora returned with a thin folder. "This is all I could find, my princess. The humans are very careful about sharing information." Opened the folder. There were only a few pages inside. Most of them contained basic facts: his age, his birthplace, his education. Nothing interesting. But on the last page, there was a single line that made her blood run cold. Previous occupation: Commander, Earth Defense Force. Service record, classified. Read the words 3 times. Commander. The human had been a military commander, and his service record was hidden, locked away from prying eyes. What had he done to deserve such secrecy? She closed the folder and sat in the darkness of her chamber, thinking. Outside her window, the 3 moons rose slowly into the night sky. Somewhere in the palace, Ho was probably training alone, moving through his deadly forms in the silent courtyard. She had treated him like nothing, like a piece of unwanted furniture, like a burden she had to carry. But now she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Who was this human? What was he hiding behind that calm, empty face? And why did she suddenly feel afraid? The attack came without warning. Was in her chamber when the first explosions shook the palace. She fell from her chair, hitting the floor hard. The crystals that floated above her head flickered and went dark. Alarms began to scream throughout the building. She ran to the window and looked out at the sky. Fire, the sky was filled with fire. Massive ships hung above the capital city like black clouds of death. They were shaped like blades, long and sharp and covered in dark metal. Red lights glowed along their hulls. As watched, beams of energy shot down from the ships, striking buildings and streets below. Towers collapsed. Fires spread. People screamed. The head arrived. The door burst open. Bora ran inside, her face pale with terror. "My princess, we must go. The palace is under attack." Grabbed her arm. "Where is my father? Where is the emperor?" "I do not know. Please, we must reach the safe room." They ran through the halls together. Everywhere, chaos reigned. Servants screamed and fled in all directions. Guards rushed toward the windows, firing their weapons at the enemy ships. Explosions rocked the building again and again. Saw a group of soldiers running toward the main entrance. Among them, she recognized Lady Min, the military advisor. The older woman was shouting orders, her face hard with determination. Lady Min called out, "What is happening?" The Lady Min shouted back, "They bypassed our border defenses. Their main fleet dropped out of hyperspace right above the capital. We have no time." "How is that possible?" "I do not know. Princess, get to safety. We will hold them as long as we can." Lady Min ran off with her soldiers, stood frozen for a moment, her mind struggling to understand. They were here, in the heart of the empire. How had they moved so fast? How had no one seen them coming? Bora pulled at her arm. "Princess, please." They continued running. The safe room was deep beneath the palace, protected by thick walls and ancient shields. If they could reach it, they might survive. But they were faster. They turned a corner and found themselves face to face with death. 3 warriors stood in the hallway. They were tall, nearly 8 feet high. Their skin was gray and rough like stone. Their eyes glowed red with murderous light. They wore heavy armor covered in spikes, and in their hands they held massive swords that crackled with energy. One of them saw and smiled. His teeth were sharp like knives. "A princess," he growled in Broken. "The generals will reward us well." Bora screamed. She tried to run, but one of them moved with terrible speed. His sword flashed and Bora fell to the ground, her body still. Could not move. She could not breathe. She looked at Bora's body, at the blood spreading across the floor, and felt her world crumble. The lead stepped toward her. "Do not worry, princess. We will not kill you, not yet. Our generals have questions, many questions." He reached for her with his massive gray hand, closed her eyes and waited for the end. But the end did not come. She heard a sound, a wet, choking sound. She opened her eyes. The warrior was staring at her with confusion. Then she saw why. A blade had appeared through his chest. Dark blood poured from the wound. The blade pulled back and fell forward. Behind him stood Ho. The human held a sword in his hand. It was not a sword. It was simpler, shorter, made of dark metal with no decoration. His clothes were torn and covered in blood. His face was calm, but his eyes had changed. They were no longer empty. They burned with cold fire. The other two roared and charged at him. What happened next could barely follow. Ho moved like nothing she had ever seen. He was a blur of motion, spinning between the two giant warriors like smoke between flames. His sword sang through the air, cutting and slashing with deadly precision. The first swung his massive blade. Ho ducked beneath it and drove his sword upward, piercing the warrior's throat. Before the body hit the ground, he was already moving toward the second enemy. The last tried to defend himself. He raised his sword to block, but Ho was faster. He struck the warrior's wrist, cutting through armor and flesh. The screamed and dropped his weapon. In the same motion, Ho spun and removed the creature's head from its shoulders. 3 warriors, dead in less than 10 seconds. Ho stood among the bodies, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his blade. He turned to look at. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Could not speak. She just stared at him with wide eyes. Ho moved toward her and took her arm. "We need to move. More will come." Bora whispered, looking at her fallen handmaiden. "She is gone, I am sorry, but if we stay here you will join her." His voice was hard but not cruel. He pulled her forward and she forced her legs to move. They ran through the burning palace. Everywhere they went, Ho cleared the path. They encountered more warriors, 5, then 10, then more. Each time Ho faced them without hesitation. Each time they fell before his blade. Watched him fight. She had seen warriors her entire life. She had seen the greatest fighters in the Empire, but this was different. This was not fighting. This was destruction. Ho did not waste a single movement. Every step, every swing, every breath was perfect. He was a machine of death wrapped in human flesh. And his eyes, those eyes that had always seemed so empty, now blazed with terrible purpose. He was not afraid. He was not angry. He was something beyond those emotions, something cold and pure and absolutely lethal. They reached the central courtyard. Bodies lay everywhere and alike. The sky above burned with fire from the ships. In the distance could see the capital city crumbling. Her home, her world, everything was dying. Ho stopped and looked around. His face was covered in blood, but none of it seemed to be his own. "The safe room is blocked," he said. "They have taken the lower levels." "Then where do we go?" asked her voice shaking. Ho was silent for a moment. Then he pointed toward the palace's communication tower. It rose high above the other buildings, its top still intact. "There," he said, "I need to send a message." "To whom?" Ho looked at her. In his eyes she saw something she had never seen before. Hope. Dark, dangerous hope. "To Earth," he said. "It is time they learned what I have become." He took her hand and led her toward the tower. Above them, the ships continued their reign of destruction. Behind them, the screams of the dying filled the air. But no longer felt afraid, not because the danger had passed, but because she was beginning to understand. She had married a stranger, a quiet, empty man she had treated like nothing. But he was not nothing. He was a storm waiting to break, and the had just made the mistake of waking him up. The communication tower was old. It had been built centuries ago, before the Empire had spread across the stars. Its stone walls were thick and strong, designed to survive attacks that modern weapons could not imagine. Inside, ancient machines still hummed with power. Ho led to the control room at the tower's base. The room was filled with screens and panels covered in dust. He moved to the main console and began pressing buttons with familiar ease. "You know how to use this?" asked. "I learned every system in this palace," Ho replied without looking up. "In case of emergency." "Why would you do that?" "Because I knew this day would come." His fingers flew across the controls. The do not stop, they never stop. I have been preparing for them since the moment I arrived. Felt cold, you knew they would attack. I knew they would attack somewhere, they always do. I hoped I was wrong about, he paused. I was not wrong. The screens flickered to life. Static filled them at first, then slowly cleared. Ho entered a long string of codes, his face tight with concentration. Outside, explosions continued to shake the city. Through the tower's narrow windows, could see landing in the streets. Hundreds of warriors poured out, killing everything in their path. What message are you sending? She asked. A signal, Ho said. A very old signal, one that should never be used unless there is no other choice. What does it mean? Ho finally looked at her. His eyes were dark pools of memory. It means the last commander of Earth has found a war worth fighting. Before could ask more questions, the door to the control room burst open. Warriors poured inside, their weapons raised. There were at least 20 of them, filling the room with their massive gray bodies. Ho stood and faced them. His sword was still in his hand. Stay behind me, he said too. The lead laughed. He was larger than the others, his armor decorated with the bones of fallen enemies. 1 human against 20 warriors, the growled. You are brave but foolish. Put down your weapon and we will make your death quick. Ho did not respond. He simply raised his sword and took a single step forward. What happened next would become legend. Ho moved through like a blade through water. He did not fight like a man defending himself. He fought like a force of nature, unstoppable and absolute. His sword cut through armor like it was paper. His body twisted between attacks that should have killed him 100 times. There were warriors. They had conquered worlds. They had destroyed entire civilizations. But against this single human, they were helpless. One by one, they fell. The lead warrior lasted longer than most, managing to exchange several blows before Ho found an opening. The human sword pierced his heart, and the great warrior collapsed with a look of disbelief frozen on his face. When it was over, Ho stood alone in a room full of bodies. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. Blood covered him from head to toe. Emerged from behind the console, her legs shaking. She looked at the dead, then at her husband. What are you? She whispered. Ho wiped his blade clean on a fallen enemy's cloak. I told you, I was a commander. No commander fights like that. No one fights like that. He was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. 30 years ago, they sent a scouting force to human space. They burned 3 of our colonies before we could respond. Millions died. My family was among them. Said nothing, she just listened. I was 15 years old. I swore that day that I would destroy them. I trained every day for 20 years. I studied their tactics, their weaknesses, their psychology. I became the best warrior Earth had ever produced. He paused. I led the force that drove them from human space. I killed their general with my own hands. The classified service record said quietly. Yes, my government was afraid of what I had become. They sent me here, hoping I would be forgotten, a peaceful marriage in a distant empire. He laughed bitterly. They did not expect that to follow. A beeping sound came from the console. Ho turned to look at the screens. His expression changed, from hard and cold to something almost like hope. The signal was received, he said. What happens now? Now we survive until help arrives. They barricaded themselves in the tower. For hours, wave after wave of attack. Ho held the entrance like a demon from ancient myths, cutting down every enemy that dared approach. His body should have given out long ago, but he kept fighting, driven by something beyond normal human limits. Helped where she could, tending his wounds during brief pauses, bringing him water, watching his back for surprise attacks. She had never felt so useless in her life. She was a princess, trained in politics and diplomacy. She had no skills for war. But she could see that Ho was weakening. Even the greatest warrior had limits. They kept coming, endless and relentless. They will break through eventually, Ho said during a quiet moment. There are too many. What do we do? We wait and we hope. Dawn came slowly. The fires still burned, but something was different. The attacks had stopped. Outside the tower could hear strange sounds, shouts, explosions, but not the organized rhythm of an assault. Ho moved to a window and looked out at the sky. His face changed. For the first time since she had known him, saw emotion break through his calm mask. He smiled, joined him at the window and looked up. Her breath caught in her throat. Ships filled the sky, hundreds of ships, but they were not ships. They were human ships. They were painted black with silver markings, sleek and deadly and moving with perfect formation. The human fleet had arrived. As watched, the human ships engaged the fleet. What followed was not a battle. It was a massacre. Human weapons tore through ships like they were made of paper. Fighters swarmed between the larger vessels, destroying engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. They tried to fight back, but they were outmatched. Within an hour, their entire fleet was burning, debris falling from the sky. On the ground, human soldiers dropped from transport ships. They moved through the city in organized squads, systematically eliminating every warrior they found. Turned to Ho. You called them, you called all of them. Not me, Ho said quietly. The signal I sent was just a request. They chose to answer. He paused. I did not know if they would. I am not exactly popular back home. Why did they come? Ho looked at her with tired eyes. Because they threatened one of our allies, and humans do not abandon their allies. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She did not know why. Perhaps it was relief. Perhaps it was something else. She had treated this man like nothing for months. She had ignored him, dismissed him, made him feel unwanted in every way she could. And he had just saved her world. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry for how I treated you. Ho looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. You did not know, he said. How could you know? I kept my past hidden. I wanted to forget what I was. He lowered his hand. But some things cannot be forgotten. Some wars never end. Below them, human soldiers continued to secure the city. Above them, human ships maintained their position, watching for any remaining threats. The battle was over. They had lost. And in the burning remains of the palace, a princess looked at her human husband and saw him truly for the first time. 1 month had passed since the battle of. The capital city was slowly rebuilding. Workers cleared rubble from the streets. Engineers repaired damaged buildings. Life was returning to normal, or at least something close to normal. The people walked through their city with new eyes. They had seen their world nearly destroyed. They had watched alien ships rain fire from the sky, and they had seen humans, the species they had looked down upon for centuries, save them from complete destruction. Nothing would ever be the same. Stood on the balcony of the rebuilt palace, watching the sunset. The 3 moons were rising slowly, their soft light mixing with the orange and purple colors of the dying day. In the distance, she could see human ships still patrolling the sky, standing guard against any remaining threats. Behind her, she heard footsteps. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. The council meeting is over, Ho said, stopping beside her. Nodded. What did they decide? They want to form a permanent alliance with Earth, full partnership, shared defense, open trade. My father agreed. Your father proposed it. Smiled. Her father, the emperor, had always been a proud man. He had agreed to her marriage only because politics demanded it. But after the battle, he had changed. He had seen what humans could do. He had seen what one human could do. Now he treated Ho not as a political tool, but as a valued member of the family. The council also had another request, Ho continued. What request? They want me to train their soldiers. They want to learn how humans fight. Turned to look at him. Will you do it? I have not decided yet. He paused. There are things about human warfare that should not be taught, things that come from dark places in our history. I am not sure the galaxy is ready for such knowledge. Understood. She had seen the way Ho fought. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. That kind of skill came from generations of human conflict, from wars that had nearly destroyed their species more than once. Whatever you decide, I will support you, she said. Ho looked at her with surprise. You would? Yes, she turned back to watch the sunset. I owe you my life, I owe you my world, but more than that I understand now. I understand who you are. And who am I? You are a warrior, not by choice but by necessity. You carry pain that most people cannot imagine. You lost everything when you were young, and instead of breaking, you became something stronger. She paused. You became a god of war. Ho was silent for a long moment. I am not a god, he finally said. I am just a man who refused to die. Reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him willingly since their wedding day. His skin was rough with calluses from countless battles. Perhaps, she said, but to the you are something more. To the you are something to fear, and to me, she hesitated. To you. Turned to face him fully. She looked into his dark eyes, those eyes that had seemed so empty when they first met. Now she could see the depth in them, the pain, the strength, the humanity. To me, you are my husband, she said. Not by obligation anymore, by choice. Ho stared at her. For a moment, his calm mask cracked. She saw something raw beneath it, something vulnerable that he had hidden from the entire galaxy. I do not know how to be a husband, he said quietly. I only know how to be a soldier. Then we will learn together, replied. We have time, we have the rest of our lives. She reached up and touched his face. He flinched slightly, unused to gentle contact. Then slowly, carefully, he leaned into her touch. I never expected this, he whispered. Neither did I. They stood together on the balcony as the last light of the sun faded. The moons rose higher, casting silver light across the healing city. Somewhere in the sky, human ships maintained their endless watch. The next morning, news spread across the galaxy. They had retreated from 3 more star systems. Word of their defeat had shaken them deeply. For the first time in 100 years, they were afraid. They had encountered something they did not understand, a species that seemed weak but fought with the fury of ancient demons. Humans. The other civilizations of the galaxy watched with new interest. They had always dismissed Earth as a minor power, a young species barely worth noticing. But now they saw the truth. When pushed to the edge, humans became something terrifying, something unstoppable. And at the center of this change stood one man. Ho became a legend. Stories spread about the human who had killed dozens of warriors single-handedly. Some said he was a super soldier, enhanced with technology. Others said he had made a deal with dark forces. The truth was simpler but somehow more frightening. He was just a man who had suffered, who had trained, who had refused to accept defeat. The Empire honored him with their highest military title, Defender of the Realm. It was a title that had not been given in 500 years. He accepted it with the same quiet calm he showed in everything else. But in private, away from the ceremonies and the politics, he was different. Discovered this slowly, day by day. She learned that he liked to read poetry. She learned that he could cook simple dishes from Earth, recipes his mother had taught him before she died. She learned that he sometimes woke from nightmares, gasping for air, his body covered in cold sweat. She learned to hold him during those dark moments, to remind him that he was no longer alone. One night they sat together in their chamber. A fire burned in the hearth, casting warm light across the room. Rested her head on Ho's shoulder while he read from a book of human stories. Tell me about Earth, she said. He closed the book. What do you want to know? Everything. What does it look like? What does the air smell like? What do people do there? He thought for a moment. Earth is beautiful. It has blue oceans and green forests and mountains that touch the clouds. The air smells different in every place. In the cities, it smells like machines and food and millions of people living together. In the countryside, it smells like grass and flowers and rain. It sounds peaceful. It is now. It was not always peaceful. Humans spent thousands of years fighting each other. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. He paused. That is why we fight so hard against outside threats. We know what war costs. We have paid that price again and again. Lifted her head and looked at him. Will you take me there someday, to Earth? Ho met her gaze. In his eyes she saw something new, something warm. Yes, he said, I will take you home. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and gentle and full of promise. Outside their window, the 3 moons have shone down on a world that had been saved. In the sky above, human and ships flew together, a new alliance born from fire and blood. The galaxy was changing. The old powers had seen what humans could become when pushed to the edge. Some were afraid. Some were curious. Some began to seek alliances of their own, hopping to stand beside Earth rather than against it. And at the heart of it all, in a palace that had nearly been destroyed, a princess and a warrior held each other close. She had married him for obligation. She stayed with him for love. And together, they would face whatever the galaxy threw at them. Because that is what humans do. They do not break, they do not bend, they rise. And when they rise, even gods take notice.